Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Do you know one of the quickest ways we can ruin our day, even if it's a good day? Is comparing ourselves to others. That will do it. And nowadays, with the internet and all the social media apps, it is very easy to find people to compare ourselves to and feel bad about ourselves. But the comparison trap has been around for a very, very long time, probably since we've been humans. If you go back to Theodore Roosevelt, the President of the United States, you'll read he wrote, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Because when we compare ourselves to others, whether we're having a feeling of inferiority or superiority, neither of these two is going to create lasting, healthy happiness in our hearts. It is truly the path of suffering when we compare ourselves to others. But it is so difficult to do because it's everywhere now. If we pick up our phones, we can, in a heartbeat, see what others are doing and say, I'm not doing that, or I'm doing better than them. But most likely, it's the first one because most people don't post things about themselves when their lives are boring. They only post things that are exciting and thrilling, for the most part. And though I do believe and have seen in my work helping with people around the world that the social media has definitely increased this comparison trap, I think we can easily argue that this comparison trap has been around pretty much since humans have existed. We can compare ourselves to other people and the way they look when we're out and about. We can compare ourselves to the neighbors and what they have or we don't have. We can compare ourselves to our relatives and see how they're doing compared to us. Or we may get into the comparison trap at work. And the difficult part here is the work environment may actually encourage the comparison trap because they feel if they compare one employee to the other, it will encourage them to work harder and make more money for the company. It's a very vicious cycle that's incredibly easy to get caught up into. So in today's podcast, I want to talk about ways that we can undo this and make sure our lives are free of the comparison trap and thus not have to suffer from the thief of joy, that of comparison. Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that it isn't something good for us. Either way, whether we think we're better than others or we think we're inferior to others, I think in either case, it is a trap that will take away from our happiness and joy in life. And I want to explain how comparison can both be alluring but incredibly painful at the same time. It's alluring because there are people that we're doing better than. There's always someone that we're doing better than. But the truth is, no matter how far up we go, there's always someone doing better than us. Always. People have better jobs, people have nicer homes, people are better looking. The trap can go on and on and on. And if we compare ourselves, we will lose. So a better approach is to say, I realize that the comparison trap is just that. It will be a trap that will rob my joy of living right now. And I don't want to do that. So why even go there, realizing that it is the path of suffering? You may be thinking, well, I am better than some people. But let me talk about what happens. When we compare ourselves to others, we quickly go to the next level, meaning that we look up. We rarely ever look down when we're trying to feel good about ourselves. We look up, and there's always someone above us. There's always someone smarter, wealthier, prettier, more handsome. No matter what we compare ourselves to, there's always someone that has more. So if we try to feel better about ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, there's just always going to be someone better than us at whatever we are comparing ourselves to. Always. Now, on the opposite end of that spectrum, I think we're all aware that comparing ourselves to people that are doing better than us is probably going to be, for the most part, the path of suffering, with one exception. Dwelling on the fact that other people are doing better than us in some certain area is, of course, going to make us not feel good. But the factor there is dwelling on. If we dwell on it, of course it's going to create sadness in our heart and really rob us of our joy. I mean, don't we all know someone who's beautiful, who's intelligent, who's wealthy, but yet they're so insecure for a variety of reasons? We all know people like that. I mean, after all, why do people, famous people who seem to have everything, commit suicide? Why would they do that? It's because the path of comparison never works. When we compare ourselves to others, there's just always someone that has more, can do better. So it's a path of suffering. And we have to begin with acknowledging this is a path I don't want to get on. I don't want to compare myself to others. I don't want to feel that I'm better than others. I just want to live my life and get off the comparison trap so that I can live the life of joy. If you like music, you may enjoy listening to What Makes You Beautiful by One Direction. It's such a beautiful song, but I think it also illustrates that no matter how good we are at something, how beautiful we are, whatever gifts we have, when we compare ourselves to others, it is the thief of joy. But Dr. Puff, I want to feel good about myself. Can't I just focus on this area that I'm good at? You can, and you can enjoy it. But if you compare yourself to others, there's just always someone that's going to be better at it than you are. So why compare? A better approach is to say, I'm doing this. I am this. And that's okay. I don't need to compare myself to anyone. I just like what I do. I like who I see in the mirror. And that's okay. Of course there's people that have more, that are smarter. But when I compare, I lose. And it's really helpful to realize that's a losing game. And when we buy into that, the comparison is a game that we just don't want to play at, we relax and we stop playing. We stop doing things that compare ourselves to others. And again, you just really, really want to convince yourself that this is the path of suffering. This robs us of our joy. And when we get that, when we deeply get that, then we can stop. We can relax and we can just be. Remember earlier when I mentioned there was something that could be helpful in the comparison trap? Let me explain what I meant by that. There is a tendency, I think, when we're doing better or we're good at something or we get praise for what we're doing to feel good about ourselves, but then that gets us into the comparison trap. Our far better approach is to say, I know when someone praises me, I can say thank you, but I have to be really careful thinking that I'm better than others, because that is the path of suffering. And here's where we can do a trick that's very helpful. We can realize that for sure, when we're good at something, we can think about someone who's better at it than we are. And then we can say, okay, I can relax. When that person compliments me for being fill in the blank, I can say, well, I appreciate it, and I'll say thank you, but I'm not going to let that in any way affect my day, because I realize that is a path of suffering. So, for example, in my life, sometimes because I've had a lot of education, people compliment me on my intelligence. I know it's silly, but they do. So what I do very quickly to dispel my mind that I'm intelligent or more intelligent than other people is that one of the things that I love to study is mathematics. I find really a lot of joy in understanding how mathematics works. And I can tell you one thing, there are people that know a whole lot more about mathematics than I do. I mean, astonishingly more. And that relaxes me. So when they say, oh, you're so smart, Dr. Puff, whatever they may say, I can say thank you, but I don't let it go to my head at all, because I realize there are a lot smarter people out there than I am. And when I think about math, it reminds me that don't let that go to your head, because that's the path of suffering. So I think where it can be helpful is when we get those compliments and people think we're wonderful, to remind ourselves that don't go down that path, just say thank you, and focus on doing what we do, accepting who we are, and loving life in the present moment. That's the path of joy. But when we compare ourselves to others, that's the path of suffering. But what if our work or our schooling puts emphasis on ranking us or comparing us to others? Some people become teachers of the year. Some people get bonuses based upon doing better. Some people are ranked higher in law or medical school. What about then? What do we do when our environment is forcibly comparing ourselves to others? In this situation, we have to acknowledge that the comparison game is being played. We just don't have to play it. What I mean by that is, we do what we do. We do the best that we want to do in the situation, and then we're done. And when the rankings come out, and we're 5th, or we're 50th, or we're at the very bottom of the barrel, we say, well, I'm sure glad I'm doing what I'm doing, and I don't really care. I won't even think about it. Because if I give it energy, it's going to take away my joy. And I'd rather be happy and be ranked low than to be unhappy and be ranked high. Or even if I'm ranked high, I still want to be happy. So why compare myself? Because someday I probably won't be ranked as highly. And I know this is a path of suffering, and I don't want to suffer. I mean, they may force these labels upon me and they may rank me, but I just don't have to play the game. I do my best, and that's what matters. And if I'm ranked top, if I get the promotions, if I don't, it's just a game. I don't want to play that game. I just want to do what I want to do. If I'm in law school, I want to learn how to be a good lawyer someday. I don't care how I'm ranked. If I'm in a business and it affects my promotion, well, then it does. I'd rather be happy than be promoted and be unhappy. Now you may be thinking, well, if I choose this path of not comparing myself to others, Dr. Puff, I'm going to do terrible in life. The opposite, I think, is true. If you've ever studied the concept of being in the zone, I've talked about it in other podcasts, that's completely about doing exceptionally well in a moment, whether it's in a sporting event or a presentation or whatever it is. It's when we're doing our absolute best, performing at peak levels of achievement. And in these situations, which we've studied extensively, guess what isn't there? When we perform at these exceptional levels, what isn't there is comparison. There's no comparison at all. That's when we do best in life. So, if we want to have beautiful lives and live well, we have to stop comparing ourselves to others. That is the path of suffering. There's just always someone going to do better than us. There's others who do worse. And if we compare ourselves to them, we can feel fleeting experiences of, I'm great, but it won't last. Sooner or later, that's going to crumble. So instead, how about if we just stop playing the game of comparison and just live our lives? Live our lives well, one breath at a time. And then we find that that combines into a great life. And the only person that can take it from us is ourselves. And it's taken from us when we compare ourselves to others. It doesn't matter if others do. We just don't let it in. As long as we don't let it in, we can have beautiful lives. But it is up to us. We have to say, I'm done with the comparison game. I'm going to live my life well, find joy in my life, and stop comparing myself to anyone. It's time for me to live my life to the fullest, one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you are finding these episodes helpful, I would love for you to share your experience with others. The easiest way for new people to listen to this podcast is just refer them to www.happinesspodcast.org. That's happinesspodcast.org. Or if you want to do more and leave a review, on that site you'll find a Yelp link, a Google Plus link, a testimonial link, or perhaps even the site you're listening to this podcast on. Often you can leave reviews there too. The reviews are an awesome way to encourage people to start listening to the Happiness Podcast. And until next time, accept what is, love what is. Do Do you ever wonder why some companies do so well, grow, and just seem to keep coming up with great ideas and keep expanding, while other companies are permeated with negativity, lawsuits, employee turnover, and just overall unhappiness in the workplace? Whichever corporate camp you find yourself in, or somewhere in between, the key to any company's ongoing success is to invest in and help their employees perform at their peak performance. There are very clear and specific things that people can do to perform well at work and in life in general. This is the focus of my podcast, and it's also the focus of my work. Being at the cutting edge of any market is sustained through investment in training employees how to perform well. But sustained growth and productivity requires specific psychological tools in order to continue to perform at peak levels. This is where I can help. I've been studying peak performance for over 30 years now, helping people all over the world. And there are very specific things that have to be maintained in order to sustain this level of performance. When companies invest in their employees are invested in them. Unfortunately, it's quite common for companies to be doing exceptionally well in the marketplace, but for unknown reasons, key employees make poor choices, leave the company, or start struggling in coping with stress-related illnesses. Companies that do well know their business really well, but human behavior works in mysterious ways unless you've been trained to understand the causes and cures of underperformance. If you're a forward-thinking company, perhaps it's time to think about giving your employees skills that may really help them perform well at work and throughout their lives. If you work for or manage a company, and you're ready to learn the skills in order to survive and thrive in any market, in any conditions, or in life in general, I'd love to help. These are the skills I've learned. These are the ones I'd love to bring to your company. True lasting success has to be seen from a broader perspective, not just monetary. And if you're ready to bring about these changes, that's where I can help. To learn more, go to www.successbeyondyourimaginationcom. That's successbeyondyourimaginationcom. And whether we're at the doorstep of retirement or have many years to go, may we always be growing and be developing our skills not only as successful employees, but as successful human beings.